Hi, my name is Nolan Hack. I'm a black revolutionary from Los Angeles, California.
My name is Julie Dye. I'm a native from Jackson, Michigan, activist.
And my name is Kane. I am Mohawk. I live in the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. I host 2 native radio programs. I am also an activist and, like I said, a radio talk show host.
Okay, so the topic today is the seemingly never-ending police violence in this country and what we face from police violence as black and indigenous people. Ironically, I got a text from somebody a little bit before we went on, and the person who sent me the text, he used to be my best friend. He was my best friend since I was 12 to about 29. And the reason we had a falling out was because since I started getting into activism, starting standing up for Black lives and a whole shtick, so to speak, he thought I was losing my mind, as you know, we've all gotten here and there. And his brother joined the police force. He became a police officer and actually said in the past that he wants to be an FBI agent. My friend texted me. He said, "Yeah, I miss you. I love you." And you know, we would watch the NFL draft together every year. So it was odd that before we came on to do this, that I get a text from my ex-best friend who is black and his brother is still a police officer. Just weird. Anyways, so I just thought I'd start with that. But as the title of this episode will be Never-Ending Police Violence, it's every day. John, you said before we went on, it's from both parties in this country, Republican and Democrat. And the reason why I wanted to bring this topic back up, because we've done a similar one before, is because the cameras are seemingly everywhere. The body cams, even though they're not really helping us, they record more of our modern lynchings. I guess it feels in the psyche, at least in my psyche, like it's getting worse. I know it's not getting worse in terms of the brass tacks. I guess I just feel it more. That's my line of thinking here. But I'm going to hear and see what you two think on this.
Well, I think with social media and all the communication nowadays, where you see it every day, where you might see it, once a week, or if it was even reported, probably went completely underreported, all the violence and the things that happened in years past. So yeah, I think that we're seeing more of it, and I'm surprised that the cameras haven't stopped a lot of it. It seems like it doesn't matter that they have the camera on. I mean, they do their best to shut the camera off or divert the camera view, but it just doesn't seem like it's a deterrent.
Well, and of course you've got police officers that are wearing body cams. There's a lot of police departments that are starting to use that, but like Julie says, you also have some of these guys conveniently either shutting off the cameras or shutting off the audio. But I will say that because we do live in such a digital society now, and there is a lot more being captured on video, not just surveillance cameras, but just people with their cell phones, I think there's probably a little bit more coerciveness, I guess, involved, because we would have never seen any of this stuff. So I think police officers are certainly more. I'm sorry, I'm on a train. there's certainly more awareness of these cameras. Let me hold on just for a second. All right, I'm sorry. Because of the cameras, I think you're not seeing as many of the situations where cops are throwing a gun down or can get away with the overt lies that they did. So now they can rely simply on Supreme Court rulings that suggest as long as they were fearful. It doesn't matter if somebody had a gun or not, or whether there was really a life-threatening situation. They only have to feel like there was a life-threatening situation. So you have that, which I think is really allowing this stuff to continue. And in spite, like Julie said, in spite of the camera footage that we're seeing from all of these different sources, these police officers are still beating the charge.
Yeah, and I will say, though, that I guess, to your point, Sean, it's harder. It is harder for cops to be more overtly racist with what they're doing when they kill us or do something illegal to us, taking our human rights. But example, there's a viral video going around. They got a brother in handcuffs, and one cop has him holding him, and the other cop's planting cocaine on him. And you had a sheriff in California recently say that, he was honest. He said, I tell my officers, kill them, because it costs more to kill them. It costs more to keep them alive than kill them. You could just pay out a settlement to the family and be done with it. And sheriffs, police across the country, a lot of departments have funds set up beforehand to pay out to victims' families. It's funny, people keep saying, Michael Brown, yeah, he deserved it. Well, if he deserved it, why did his family get $3 million? Was it $3 million, $1 million? It was millions of dollars, whatever it was. Why did they pay the family if they're not at fault? So,
well, and it's not even just a fund to set aside; it's insurance. They actually have insurance to pay this stuff, which is absurd on a whole different level. Because on one hand, the fact that you have to insure a police department against these kinds of things, so these payments can be made, is absurd on one level. But the other thing is, it doesn't actually cost the police department in the way that an actual fine or settlement should cost the police department. It doesn't come out of their operating budget. It comes out of an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's similar to what big conglomerates have when they have to recall a product. They have funds set up. So if they have to recall something, that's cool. It's cool. It's killing people. That's whatever. As long as they're making billions of dollars. And I'm not going to say my police department, but my hometown police department, LAPD, gets $1 billion, more than $1 billion every year. One point I always try to keep on the front end of things when the discussion comes up is that indigenous people have this problem as well in their community. And in fact, Native people are killed at a higher rate than black people or any other race in the United States by the police. And when this subject does come up, I'd say in the high 90s out of 100 times, I'm just guesstimating, indigenous people are not talked about at all. Even to the point of when people talk about the origins of American policing, the American U.S. police, slave patrols. There were slave patrols and, in quotes, Indian patrols to kill Native people, keep taking their land, My favorite one, when I first learned about this, was to keep the Native people away from the white population. Okay, yeah. The white people are the ones that you should leave alone. The Native people are the ones you should go after.
Well, this is the origin of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment I mean, there was already the right to do the militia stuff and all that other things, but the whole idea of encouraging, empowering, and promoting every individual to have a gun was about keeping Native people at bay because of being dispossessed of the land, and for those slave patrols. So it really goes to that. But to your other subject, or your other point, part of the reason, in spite of the fact that Native people are killed by a cop at a higher rate proportionally in many of the age demographics of that this thing is measured in, it is still only proportional. And we are such a marginalized people. Native people represent less than 0.7% of the U.S. population. So even if we're the higher percentage, the total numbers are very small. And you have to understand that many of our Native communities, and keep in mind, we aren't just killed in Native communities. I mean, our people exist in cities too. Over 60% of our population lives in urban areas, not on Native territories. But these abuses that take place in Native territories or around Native territories are in very rural areas that get very little attention, either from any kind of news media, or the police departments are so, marginalized as well that they're not going to get any attention to it. And the quagmire that exists because of the lack of jurisdictional oversight, whether it's the federal government or any other, I mean, some of these police departments aren't going to have, internal investigation departments and that kind of thing. So that's the reason you don't hear so much about it.
It's Native people aged 20 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 44. Those are the three of the five groups most likely to be killed by police. And that lack of coverage, I've heard about a gentleman by the name of Adam Poorbear. He was killed in Rosebud, South Dakota. And the only mention of it was in a news article, local news article. It didn't mention his name, but it did mention the fact the FBI was there. And the FBI being on Native reservations is nothing new, obviously. If you know anything about Leonard Peltier incident in Oklahoma, that whole situation. But it's really, I think, one major example of the whole cake of Native erasure, because I look at something like Brazil, and Brazil obviously used to be nothing but Native people, yet now it is a majority black, and although black people are being killed at a ridiculous rate down there, the discussion of Native people being anywhere in and around Brazil is not even a discussion. So just like with police violence, it's not even a discussion, even from your most prominent black activists. And I'll give one credit. I'll give two. Dick Gregory, rest in power, and Colin Kaepernick. Kaepernick has aligned with Native people, and from the jump said people of color being killed by police. And Gregory did so much for Native people in terms of fighting the mascot issue, which obviously, Julie, as well as anybody in terms of how serious the mascot issue is. But it's just I guess it's that whole thing of you guys being treated like ghosts on your own land. This is your land, and yet, apparently this is only a black issue. At least that is how it's portrayed mainstream.
Well, and then our territories, we're treated like ghosts even within, not just in our own homelands, but in our communities right now. I mean, this whole, there's huge question marks about law enforcement, and this notion, and this is kind of where you kind of got to get back to it, this whole idea of rule of law, where like law is the guiding principle, not morality, not ethics, not intelligence. not compassion, but just the words, the written words on a paper that what man decided to say, these are the rules that we live by. Nobody lives by the rule of law. Laws are designed to protect people. That's what they're supposed to be. They are not supposed to be the guiding principles of life. And this is everything has been turned around so much that we use laws to justify behavior, or to now we use laws to guide what we go around and what we don't go around, rather than letting real principles of ethics and morality guide us.
Yeah, it seems like the twisting around of of reality on this land has gone from what you just said. Let's focus on humanity, and then if we're going to have laws to protect people, but it's reversed into, okay, let's protect this colonized society that we put up. Let's protect one group of people's lives above everybody else's, and obviously not protect those other people. And that's
but it doesn't even have to be as overt as that, because the reality is the legislators are white. Mm-hmm. They're elected by white people, and the laws they pass are going to automatically be more geared towards their self-interest. And so it isn't just a rigged and a purposefully rigged game. It's rigged because where the balance of power rests. We talk about the Civil Rights Act, and the Democrats lost the South because of the Civil Rights Act, and have continued to lose the South because of the Civil Rights Act. This is how political just doing the right thing was when it comes to law.
Yeah, that bill, the Civil Rights Act, there were senators that filibustered that bill for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And though it eventually passed, we still don't have civil rights. A lot of those civil rights that you speak of, human rights that people are supposed to have the minute you're born, that's kind of a shame that even though that did pass after all that racist filibustering, here we still are. And you bring this up earlier, John, about how, I can't remember, on the show, before the show, how not just white folks uphold this policing system, whether it's the FBI, DOJ, police. Back in the day, you had black and indigenous people, either volunteer or get taken to become slave patrollers or native patrols, quote unquote Indian patrols. And here we are, 2018, same thing's happening. Someone like Adam Porbear is killed on a native reservation by tribal police. The words tribal police never existed until white people stepped foot on this land. Just like
Sitting Bull was killed by Standing Rock Sioux police. Mm-hmm. I do want to say one thing, and it's a bit of a correction, or maybe a clarification. Our rights exist. The question is, are they violated? So when we talk about even things like civil rights or human rights, it doesn't matter whether somebody is violating. It doesn't mean. It doesn't matter when you evaluate whether those rights exist. Clearly, those rights exist. The right not to be raped exists. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get raped. So when I hear somebody say we still don't have rights, we always had them. The question is how aggressively are we fighting for them to defend those rights?
Yeah.
Right, because when they are violated, what do you have to do? You have to file a complaint or file a lawsuit to get it remedied. And to my way
or
of
you
thinking,
or you have to raise hell in ways that can be civil disobedience or resistance or whatever else. I think the system is rigged, and the thing is, we should never accept that our rights don't exist, and or that the only way they exist is through legislation. That's the problem. I think this whole idea that man-made law is such a precedent in our lives, and we even rely on it even subconsciously, because when we say that civil rights didn't exist until the Civil Rights Act passed, or that they still don't exist, we're already buying into the idea that the legislation either didn't exist or is ineffective when it did exist, and we aren't going back to our own self-preservation of those rights, regardless of law.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And when you talk about law or adhering to man's law, we both of our people, with our many nations, we had laws. We had constitutions and political doctrines, but this mess was nowhere near our laws and doctrines and constitutions. Much like the Iroquois Constitution, which was
but even that, I mean, when people call the Great Law of Peace, that's not actually what the words say. The words Lagoa, good process, a path to follow. That's not the same thing as saying, okay, we've carved up a specific line of words to say this is what is allowed or was not allowed. It was about process. When we talk about law from an indigenous standpoint, we're really talking about natural law, the laws that don't need to be written. And I think by the time you actually start crafting in the assembly of words what is legal and what is not legal. See, natural law isn't about what's legal and not legal. It's about what is right and what is wrong. And this is the thing. And when I say right and wrong, it's, are you going with nature or are you going against nature? And those are not difficult things to observations to make. The difference between good and evil, legal or illegal, right and wrong, that can be a lot more subjective.
Yeah, especially in this society, white society, the really good versus evil and right and wrong have become an opinion. Our lives mattering is an opinion. I've heard our children, when they are killed because of the system, albeit police, community violence, what have you, hate crime, our children are blamed for their own deaths because the society says our lives are not supposed to have any value at all. The 3/5 of a human being, merciless Indian savages, that whole thing is that in a spitting image. And I'd flash back to Jason Perro's death. He was away. He was away from school that day, so white folks took that opportunity. We'll see, if he'd been in school, this wouldn't happen. If he was in school, you see, it's his fault. He's 14 years old. He's 14. And of course, white children, white men, whatever, do whatever they want, and they'll massacre a bunch of people. Oh, he was troubled. He had a hard life. He wasn't hugged enough as a child. All that stuff. And we have to, as you said, John, we have to be careful not to buy into any of that, because one is, I try to make the point all the time. This stuff, the policing, these politics, these alleged values, and I will say alleged values because there's stuff about whiteness itself that is just wrong, not white people, for those who are listening, we have to remember this stuff is not ours. This is not what we used to believe or adhere to. And I see, and the two people who joined me on the panel tonight, I see a lot of us still going with. I remember a Native gentleman once said, "The old way," adhering to our old ways, who we truly are as two individual people, instead of buying into this the whole kitten caboodle and whole ball of wax as we do. And another thing I always I try to notice as much as possible, because it's one thing with colonization, if you are especially if you are a black or Native person, you have to find the news. You can't just turn on the regular news and find out what's going on in the world. You have to dig to find out what's really going on. But when it comes to police violence, especially black women and especially Native women, not talked about. And the assaults, the rapes by police officers of Native girls, and black women, and Native women are off the charts and always have been. And when one of our women or girls is murdered, so often it is not talked about. But Julie, what are your thoughts on that? Especially bringing up missing and murdered Indigenous women in your community.
No, we haven't had the epidemic because we don't have the large rural reservation areas. We have smaller rural, pretty well populated.
Well, more so, I'm more so like in the Native community as a whole. Like so, I meant that as an umbrella term. I said no more clear. My fault.
Yeah. Well, just basically invisible. Out of sight, out of mind. Their lives don't matter. I'm sure, lack of investigations. They just don't want to expend any extra money or time or effort if they're Native victims. It's a horrible shame. I mean, but it's a good thing that we're learning about them now because of the social media movements and that in Canada and in the U.S. Particularly, a lot of it goes on in the Dakotas and New Mexico and Arizona. But they're shining a light on it and hopefully making some progress. And
well, there's also this issue of devaluating life because of lifestyle, and even when that lifestyle is not necessarily lifestyle choices, but lifestyles that have been imposed upon them by via poverty or displacement, or and so much of the genocide that's taken place. So, because if you can immediately start to evaluate a person because of where they come from, what they do for a living, are they employed, are they productive in the way that Americans want to judge productivity? I mean, if you're a Native person and if you're a news anchor, then you're going to get all kinds of coverage when that body when that person gets killed or assaulted. But if you're just the average person living on a Native territory or living in obscurity in an urban area, and you're a person of color, Native or otherwise, you're just not going to be valued the same. I mean, when I think about things like the Amber Alert, that whole system was developed because of a white girl.
Yeah.
And how many times are people of color listed in those on those Amber Alerts proportionally? I would dare say that it's got to be pretty minimal. The other thing I wanted to bring up, there's also this concept. I mean, and it gets to the core of what this whole topic is about, which is the police violence and this issue of law. When police evaluate whether, and they actually use the expression, a good shoot. Was it a good shoot? So is it legally defensible? Not whether it was justified in hindsight, unarmed, or was the person really at risk? Was the shot going away? Can they characterize the killing as a good shoe. And let's be clear, it isn't just that one police officer who said we should kill them rather than injure them. The use of deadly force is intended to take the life. There is no place in the handbook, the police handbook, that says use a firearm for anything except for deadly force. So I think that's the other thing that's got to be acknowledged fully, I guess.
It's true. You have police officers getting fired for not killing a person of color. You have the police. They're so ridiculous. They have one, of course, they have arrest quotas targeting people of color. They also have a quota for IQ. If you're past a certain IQ, you cannot become a police officer, meaning there's no such thing as a smart cop in the United States. And some of that you can trace back to slavery because the command, at least back then, the commanders were the rich white folk. The regular slave patrolling all over the place. Those could be very common people, common white folks.
Mindless thugs is what you were reaching for.
I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying. Yeah, you're not wrong. Mindless thugs. I'm glad you said that because it needs to be said. These hard truths have to be told. Cops are not a good thing. Period. There's no if for that guy or this one, you could use the exact same logic for the Nazis. Sure, you can pick out a couple good Nazis. Klaus von Stauffenberg, they made a movie about him with Tom Cruise called Valkyrie on DVD. Store it near you. But this one cop was good, and he just okay. Sorry, we're talking about the whole force, and the very high majority of police officers are just not good news. They're not good news. And
and even if the vast majority of police officers are good, the problem is the vast majority of police officers are complicit in covering up for the bad. So where does that leave you?
Yeah. Well, and I'll use the Nazi comparison again because there were Germans, Aryans, whatever the hell you want to call them, who signed up to join the Nazis because, hey, I'm helping my country. We've been through hard times, the Treaty of Versailles, economic recovery, the Great Depression. I'm going to help my country. Or I'm going to help reform. I'm going to help stop him, whatever, I'm going to help our police force in my city clean up our police force. It's like the whole system itself here. You cannot clean up something that is inherently rotten. Who is going to eat an apple that is rotten to its core? I don't know anybody. I'll still eat that. Yeah. No. You throw that away and you move on. The problem is we have not been able collectively, obviously for a variety of reasons under colonization, to get to that point of, okay, we got to get rid of this. Even within the movement, so often you hear, okay, yeah, let's fire the cop for killing one of us. Fire? He took one of our lives. You put them behind bars for the rest of their lives. Yeah. There's not enough talk about abolishing police itself. You hear police reform, which we saw that with the crime bill. You don't hear police abolition so much. And that's one thing that has to be put as an elephant right into the room, that police have to go. And I guess that's the whole thing. The system has to.
Well, and again, taking it to a native example, is we do have native territories that have no police forces. And the crime isn't any higher in our territories without a police force than in any other community that has one. On the Seneca Nation territory, we don't have a police force. They have a marshal service that are more like along the lines of processors, but they don't carry weapons and they don't arrest people and that kind of thing. And we're in a constant, battle with the outside police force and their role on our territories and that kind of stuff. But in the earliest writings of the New World by white people, Jack Weatherford in Indian Givers acknowledged that the most prevailing theme that was written about was how there seemed to be social order and harmony in the absence of kings, queens, standing armies, prisons, courts. So in the absence of having some authoritarian arbitrator of peace and justice still existed. And that still seemed just bizarre to the white man who observed it.
It's the truth. There's women in South America. In the community down there, they abolished police. They abolished politicians. They went, no, none of this here. Things are kind of thriving over there. And of course, you don't see that story on 60 Minutes or what was the Comey? What was it the Comey Town Hall? Whatever the hell it was called. Let's have a member of the FBI, the leader of the FBI, come on for a town hall. That was absolutely. I saw that on Twitter. My eyes started blinking at a ridiculous speed. And you see, with its Mueller and Comey. Yes, Trump is as bad of a human being as will ever exist on this planet. I will never debate that. But we should not be defending or helping people who spent their careers, their livelihoods, destroying our communities, destroying our way of life, making it a daily mission to take away our humanity as people of color, and black folks and Native folks. Yet there's
well, I'd like to bring another very contemporary topic to the conversation, and that's the conviction of Bill Cosby. I'm already starting to see a bunch of white people weigh in, saying, he shouldn't be judged for the worst things he did in his life. He did a lot of good. He entertained us. He educated children. He did all these wonderful things, and he's going to be sentenced to something that would be tantamount to a life sentence or a death sentence because of his age and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, wait a second here. This is a guy who for decades, as many as 50 women, he drugged and raped. For over decades he did this, and then was able to avoid any persecution or prosecution for more decades. The fact that he finds himself at 80 years old before he finally gets busted for something, if he has to go to prison for 10 years at 80 years old, that's not a death sentence. That's not even a life sentence. That's still only 10 years at the end of a very, very affluent life, adored by white people through most of the time, and a guy who preyed upon women, and especially marginalized women like black women, who would never have an opportunity to hold him accountable because of the stature that he gained with white people. So I'm really interested to hear what Julie would have to say and weighing in on this.
Well, I haven't heard that much. I just heard the about the conviction or the decision today, but I haven't heard any of the responses yet. I did hear that he went off on a rage and screaming, cussing rage or whatever after the announcement was made. But he has up to this point skated on all the accusations and all, every time in court, and this time he didn't. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of sentence that comes about. And you're right. He's only, probably has 10 more years at the most. I think he did a pretty good job of avoiding jail up to now. And he needs to be as accountable as anybody else would be, just like this mess we have at MSU here, the Larry Nassar case.
Yeah.
That's horrific. And talking about bad cops, our Jackson County Sheriff here is a real good example. This guy, I mean, he is really disgusting, and it only came to light after one of his lieutenants audio taped him on several occasions. And this guy, oh my goodness, I mean, he has talked about making snuff films with one of his female employees. He's talked about one of his black employees, how he needs to, his best stance is his boot on his neck on the floor or something, and he talks about disabled people and just, I mean, really horrific the things this guy said, and he was audio taped, and we can't get rid of him. The only way to get rid of him is for him to resign, which he refuses, or for the governor to remove him. And the governor's not done anything about him. I mean, we can recall him, but of course the county is broke and they don't want to spend the money to do that, and it's a big, huge undertaking to do that. And it's horrible. We can't get rid of him, and he apologized, but that doesn't change anything. It doesn't change the way he's going to operate, and his whole
He apologized for getting caught?
Pardon me?
I said he apologized for getting caught?
Yeah, probably. I mean, he just said he'd try to do better or whatever, but he's not. That's it. He's not taking any steps to get counseling or do anything with his department with training or anything. The whole department is poisoned, and it's sickening. There's nothing we can do about him.
And that's the whole antithesis of the whole thing. The whole thing is toxic. The whole thing is infected in terms of law enforcement. And I think when we talk about police, we kind of stop there. We need to remember there's a thing called the FBI. There's things called the Department of Justice. There's the CIA, the NSA, and a lot of these things I just mentioned, these entities, they're messing with us. At least speaking, I think you can speak on both of us because indigenous people in South America, they're messing with us outside of this country. Killings, rapes, pillaging, you name it, propping up tyrants, killing any kind of true democracy in lands of color. And Julie speaking on the whole thing with Larry Nasser and Ashraf Al-Khawsi. Again, not to beat a dead horse here, but just like with the police, the way we treat women is completely different than the way we used to treat women, especially since there were so many matriarchal societies in both our two lands. The Constitution of Mali, the Kurukan Fuga, the Kurukan Fuga. One article says in the Constitution, says, never offend women or mothers. Another one says, women should be associated with all of our monuments. Women should be associated with all of our managements. Meaning, they can work here or there because they're another human being and they're equal with us. I'm just a man. They're okay. And we move on. Instead of, we're going to pay women much less. We're going to pay colored women much less. And the way you have this law enforcement in this country doing the opposite of protecting women, at least not talking about white women, but still even white women being oppressed, but going out of their way to oppress and harm and completely dehumanize women of color. It makes my skin crawl. And thank God Cosby's going to jail, but we still have R. Kelly.
A guy named Donald Trump too.
Trump. Well, I was just mentioning the folks in our, the wild, horrible black men. I was mentioning a couple in our community, but Trump, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey. Yeah, that was all white men. You could just name presidents for that, I think. But that, and that goes back to the whole treating women like we used to. R. Kelly has a sex dungeon, for God's sake. As far as I know, they haven't shut down. It's still there. And cops are supposed to, if there's a sex dungeon that has underage girls and it's non-consensual, the first thing that's supposed to happen when somebody hears, here come the police. No. The black girls? No. Nope. Leave that alone. That's good. That's the whole. It was the whole. And thankfully, you're hearing it more often now. And John, you alluded to earlier how at least there's more of a conversation about police violence. Don't call the police. People are saying to each other, "Don't call the police. Don't call the police," because you'll have a situation where one of us gets killed because, the police were called, and something comes out of the original problem that had nothing to do with the original problem, but there was a person of color there, so kill them. That's something that goes to eliminating us and subjugating us. We're not supposed to have any freedom. And when we have freedom, or semblances of freedom, people get, the majority gets upset, the power structure gets upset, police officers surely get upset. I will forever remember Bill O'Reilly on the O'Reilly Factor, must have been, 8 years ago. He's had Kane on, and he said, John, you know what they're doing, John? They're trying to tear down the white, male, Christian power structure. And I'm just sitting there watching TV like, he said it. He said it's a thing. He said it's a thing. Anybody gonna do? No? Okay. Let's just keep watching then, because, no one's gonna do anything about it. Like the police. The police are not here to help us. They were invented, literally, to harm us, to kill us. And that needs to be...
Again, I guess to get to the origins of what a police officer, what cops were, what the whole police idea was developed for, was to protect the property of wealthy people. It was all about protecting property. So it wasn't about protecting people. It wasn't to serve and protect people. It was to protect the property of wealthy people. I mean, that's what it is. But, I mean, if we get down to the basic concept of racism and the fact that it's systemic, which means there's a system that enforces that. And at its foundation, that system is the Justice Department. That system is the Police Department. That system is judges, jails, and police officers. That is the system that lies at the foundation of keeping the systems in place. I mean, that's what they do. They protect the systems.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're code of silence. No, there was I don't know which police department it was or where it was, that they came out with that report that said they carried toy guns to throw down just in case they shot someone, and they could throw it by the body and make it look like they shot them because they had a gun. They actually carried those. Somebody came out with that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be a real gun because
right.
Jeopardy, just as they thought they were. I mean, you were talking about Jason, but what about Tamir? I mean, Tamir Rice. Here you have a young child playing with his Christmas present, his airsoft gun in a park, doing the exact American thing that the NRA proposes, teaching our children to participate in this gun ownership mentality. And he's shooting an airsoft gun, and he is killed without even a warning. Cops pulled up within seconds of pulling up on the grass in front of a gazebo. They throw open the doors and shoot him. Just shoot him. I mean, even a toy gun or no gun at all can somehow protect these police officers in this notion of a good shoot versus a bad shoot. And then even when there's not guns involved at all, I still go back to Eric Gardner being choked out. I mean, having the life choked out of him, not only by one police officer, but by all of the others who were with their knees on his chest and on his head, and even the EMTs that were there who refused him any first aid immediately after. I mean, the whole system becomes involved in this thing. So while you can point to the one officer choking him, you can point to the 10 officers around him who let it happen.
Yeah. You have that New York, that whole New York structure right there. You hit it on the head. De Blasio, has he done anything for Eric Gardner? No. You have Cuomo? Hell no. Well, okay, wait. We have a TV star coming in. She's a liberal. Nope. She supports De Blasio and NYPD and Hillary Clinton. Okay, so we have a circle of that code of silence that you said, Julie. It's the way it is, and the cops themselves, the way they are trained, they're trained to harm us. Like, okay, yeah, it goes back to slavery, goes back to the original native genocide on this land, but also they're trained to harm and kill us. In Canada and the United States, you have the target practice is Native women or a young black youth, a black youth, a male, looking all ghetto and hood and all that nonsense. And that's okay. That's okay. But yeah, the black men are thugs, Native women, there's no life force there, so it's all good. And of course, this is how they're trained. They go out, on the streets, and that's why you have Native women and black men, of course, everybody else, in so much trouble with police for just living, I mean, Eric Garner, I can't breathe. That's the I can't breathe thing has been said simply more than when he said it and said he lost his life. There's a brother named Jonathan Sanders in Mississippi. Same thing. I can't breathe, getting choked out by cops, and they called him the N-word a bunch of times. They choked him out for 20 minutes and killed him. 20 minutes and killed him. And of course, his name does not reach, the national media like the high majority of any of our modern lynchings as black or Native people. It's just, thankfully, Eric's was obviously videotaped. It's New York, but it's rare. It's rare for the news to actually talk about it at all, let alone talk about it for more than a day. Sandra Bland's killer got off. Tamir Rice's killer. They basically all get off, and then the news just stops talking about it, which is more complicity with the code of silence. White silence, silence.
That story about the Waffle House guy and then the black guy grabbed the gun from him, and here was an assault style gun, and the guy just took it away from him and wasn't even armed. It is supposed to be, well, you got to have a gun to match another gun, and which kind of blew that argument out of the water. Kind of.
Yeah, Ben Carson's probably somewhere just shaking, not knowing what to think. Carson previously said that no, it was one of the many mass shootings that happened in this country. After he said, if I'd been there, I just would have, gone in there and just tried to stop him. I would have just tried to stop him. And you need guns, so it's easier to stop somebody when you have a gun. Well, okay, but logic and rhyme and reason are not something that are values or philosophies of the police. Like, what did you say, John? A good shoot. Who thinks these things up? Who the phrase slave patrol or quote unquote Indian patrol. Who thinks this stuff up? This stuff is absolutely abhorrent, and yet it still goes on. Has reverberated all the way to now. At least on this land, 300 some years, something like that. Yeah, but so I think from the standpoint of stopping it, continuing the conversation, which we're doing tonight, but how do we get that abolitionist mindset, getting rid of the police, which also puts a ripple effect in it. Hey, maybe get rid of the system too, but get rid of the police. How do we make that stick like glue onto the table in terms of the idea of abolishing the police?
Well, I think one of the things that we again, a lot of this conversation comes to the same place. In the absence of community that where the people you live next to hold each other accountable and are accountable for each other, in the absence of that, you look for an authoritarian figure outside of your community, and that's what police forces are. So until we get in a position that we are more willing to address the conflicts that arise in our communities, and look, I know people always say the extreme, what's the community going to do about somebody who's murdering or whatever else? Look, if you stay on top of what's happening in the dynamics of a community with the families and the children, you can prevent that stuff from ever getting to that place. We have to stop calling the cops. I know it sounds simple, but it isn't just a function of taking the phones away. It's about saying, well, what do we do to make sure that we have the means to address the issues that would otherwise fall upon a police force or a judge or a jail or a prison or whatever else. Until we come up with better ways for dealing with the conflicts in our communities and attaining our own evaluation of restorative justice, we're going to rely on these systems that are part of the legacy of slavery and oppression.
Reminds me of banks. You need debit cards, credit cards, all that stuff. You need a bank, credit union, what have you. And banks, hey, Chase had slaves. They had slaves. That's nice. Wells Fargo, oh, great. And then, of course, Dakota Pipeline, both of them. I guess regaining dominion over our own lives and communities, and I think education, teaching the two of us, especially on this land, that no, police are not necessary, because before white folks came over here, there were no police. The word police didn't exist. And to quote a snow demon named Ben Franklin, native life was a utopia. So if it's utopia means something incredible society, harmonious way of life, and there's no police. So maybe have no police. That's just something to talk about, as we end the show. So maybe not have any police. That's just what we're saying here on the panel tonight. But I thank you both, Julie and John. You were great as always, and I wish you both a healthy and happy week. And can't wait to have you back on the next time you are on the panel.
Pretty good.
Well, thank you for inviting both of us, and again, thanks for throwing the conversation out there for us to engage in.
Indeed. All right.
Thanks, Nolan.
Peace, everybody.
See you later.